500 years ago, world maps show dragons at the edges and oceans lead off into nothingness. But one group of brave sailors, on a mission to find spices, ended up drawing a line around our entire planet for the very first time. This is the story of the amazing ocean expedition that circled the globe, and the incredible, strange, and terrifying things they saw along the way. Picture yourself standing on a dock. You're about to board a wooden ship no bigger than a modern tennis court. You'll be living on this ship with over 200 other men for years. You're not sure if you'll ever come home. This was the reality for 270 sailors on September 20th, 1519. Their leader was a determined Portuguese captain named Ferdinand Magellan. He had convinced the King of Spain to fund a crazy idea, sail west from Europe to reach the spice-rich lands of Asia in the east. No one had ever done this before. Their fleet was 5 old ships, loaded with barrels of salted meat, hard biscuits, wine, and even live cows and pigs. As the coast of Spain disappeared behind them, they sailed into a mystery. Have you ever gotten lost somewhere new? Now imagine getting lost for over a year along a coast no one had fully explored. The first part of their journey down South America was a long, cold search. They were hunting for a secret passage, a strait or river that would cut through the continent. They stopped at every single bay and river mouth, hoping it would be the one. The weather got colder. The food started to run low. The sailors grew scared and angry. Some of the Spanish captains even tried to overthrow Magellan in a mutiny. He stopped them, but the fear was still there. Then, brutal winter storms forced them to stop and wait in a freezing, windy bay. One of their 5 ships, the Santiago, was smashed to pieces while trying to scout ahead. Things looked hopeless. What would you do if you'd been searching for a year and found nothing but dead ends? You'd probably want to turn back. But then, on October 21st, 1520, they saw something different. A dark, narrow opening between cliffs. It didn't look like a river. It looked like a doorway. Magellan decided to risk it. They sailed into the winding, treacherous channel. For 38 nerve-wracking days, they navigated this watery maze. The water was deep and salty, a good sign. But the currents were strong and the shores were rocky. In the middle of the journey, the crew of the biggest ship, the San Antonio, got so scared they turned around and deserted, stealing the ship and sailing back to Spain. Finally, with just 3 ships left, they sailed out into a vast, quiet, and endless new ocean. Magellan named it the Mar Pacifico, the peaceful sea, but this peace was a trick. But the ocean was not just empty, it was merciless. Day after day, the sun burned their skin, and the wind barely touched their sails. The ship creaked endlessly, as if it were slowly giving up. The men began to lose track of time. Days blurred together, weeks felt endless. Some sailors whispered that they were cursed. Others believed they had sailed beyond the edge of the world. There were no landmarks, no birds, no stars they recognized, no signs that land even existed anymore. Hunger changes the human mind. Strong men argued over crumbs. Friends accused each other of stealing food. Hope became fragile, and despair spread quietly through the ship. Every sunrise felt like a punishment. Every sunset felt like survival. They prayed constantly, not for riches, but simply to see land again. Some promised to give up the sea forever. Others promised gold to churches they might never reach. A few lost the strength to pray at all. The Pacific tested more than their bodies. It tested belief itself, belief in maps, belief in kings, belief that the world made sense. Yet somehow, the ships kept moving forward, carried by stubbornness and the thin thread of hope that tomorrow might be different. Can you imagine sailing for over 3 months and seeing nothing? No birds, no islands, just the same blue water every single day? That's what happened next. No European knew how big the Pacific Ocean really was. They thought Asia was just a short trip away. They were terribly, terribly wrong. The crossing took 98 days. Their food was a nightmare. The biscuits crawled with worms. The water turned yellow and smelled awful. They ate the cowhides that protected the ropes, soaking them in seawater to soften them. They ate sawdust. rats became a precious meal. Without fresh fruits or vegetables, a horrible disease called scurvy struck. It made men's gums turn black and bleed, their teeth fall out, and their bodies grow too weak to move. One by one men died. They were buried at sea in this lonely, endless ocean. What they saw was an empty, hungry blue desert. What do you think the first sight of land after 3 months at sea would feel like? On March 6, 1521, a sailor's cry of land must have sounded like a miracle. They had reached the islands we now call Guam and then the Philippines. What they saw was paradise. Lush green mountains, fresh water, and friendly people bringing them bananas, coconuts, and fish. Their bodies began to heal. But this beautiful place held a hidden danger. Magellan made a fatal mistake. He got involved in a fight between two local groups on the island of Mactan, believing his European weapons made him invincible. On April 27, 1521, he was surrounded and killed. The crew watched in horror from their ships. Their leader, the man who had pushed them across an ocean, was gone. What they saw that day was the end of their captain and the start of a desperate struggle to survive. Now leaderless and afraid, the survivors had to flee. With too few men to sail 3 ships, they burned the Concepcion and sailed on with 2. A new captain, a Spanish sailor named Juan Sebastian Elcano, took charge. They finally reached their original goal, the Spice Islands, or the Moluccas. What they saw there was the reason for their whole journey. They saw forests of trees heavy with cloves and nutmeg. The air smelled incredibly sweet and spicy. They filled their ships' holds with these precious treasures. But just as they were ready to celebrate, disaster struck again. Their flagship, the Trinidad, sprang a terrible leak and was too damaged for the journey home. Only one ship remained, the small weary Victoria. So you have one ship loaded with valuable spices and a crew of tired sick men. Do you try to go back the way you came back across the terrifying Pacific? Elcano chose a different, braver path. He decided to keep sailing west into the completely unknown Indian Ocean to try to complete a full circle of the earth. It was another journey of pure hardship. To avoid Portuguese warships that would arrest them for stealing the spice trade, they sailed through empty seas for months without stopping. They were starving again. More men died. When they finally reached the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, they faced some of the worst storms on the planet. Giant waves tossed their tiny wooden ship like a toy. Finally, in sheer desperation, they risked stopping at the Cape Verde Islands, a Portuguese territory, to get food. They were almost caught. 13 men were captured, but the Victoria escaped into the open Atlantic.